Hispanic Heritage Month obviously is not specific to a particular national origin group. Or Cinco de Mayo, which is obviously of Mexican origin, but has sort of turned into a pan-Latino or pan-Hispanic sort of event. Okay, so this is a little bit difficult to represent, but the idea is that this is sort of an interconnected and very vastly developed world that, that has grown out of this Hispanic Latino strategy and extends into virtually every profession in American society and almost every sphere of American life. It is a greatly successful strategy of organizing all people of Hispanic origin, without regard to their national origin, into a group, into an organization, for purposes of advancing a common interest in a profession or vis-a-vis a particular institution or American politics. Okay, what about the other side? That is to say, obviously there are also people who both define themselves primarily in terms of their national origin, and they're such, obviously, amongst Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Mexican Americans, or Mexicans, Mexican migrantes. We're going to talk about the idea of remaining Mexican. Immigrants start arriving in the late 19th century, primarily to Texas. We had a flood of immigrants come into California because as a result of the gold rush, and not just from Mexico, but from other countries as well. Here's another finding that we really don't find elsewhere. As I said before, the Hispanic strategy really dates to the 19th century, not just to the 1970s. And the existence of primarily Mexican immigrant-led organizations also dates to the 19th century, to the 1860s. At the time of the French intervention in Mexico, people are aware of the French intervention. This is what produces Cinco de Mayo, the Battle of Puebla. Over 100 juntas patrióticas were organized in California alone. And there's a reason why mainly in California. It was not only the population that was there, because a lot of people that arrived because of the gold rush, and because of the American Civil War. In fact, the South, the U.S. South, which Texas was a part of, actually supported the French intervention in Mexico. And it's only the North in which it was possible to support the Benito Juarez-led government, the Mexican Republic, which was on the run of getting away from French troops. Over 100 juntas patrióticas were established in California to raise money and to send money and support the Benito Juarez and the Mexican Republic in the Mexican-French War of the French intervention in the 1860s. And that's the first instance that we find of transnational, binational organization led by Mexican migrantes in the United States. But it included people that defined themselves as Californios, and even others who had come as mineros from Chile, from Peru, as well as from Mexico, who were involved in these organizations. One of the things that characterizes the difference between these two as networks, the Latino-Hispanic network on the one hand, and the Mexican Migrante network, we've already mentioned one is definitely a strategy that is pan-ethnic or multinational. The other one is very distinctly binational, just specific to people of Mexican origin, and in particular migrantes. One network, and this is just in terms of how networks work, one network functions almost entirely in English, and the other network clearly communicates primarily in Spanish, right? And so we can represent graphically what we would put at the very middle of the Mexican Migrante Network, or the hometown associations, los clubes de oriundos, and their federaciones, and the consejos de federaciones. But there's also a number of other sorts of Mexican migrante or Mexican immigrant-led institutions and organizations in the United States. Some of them are political. Some of them are very much part or linked to the Mexican government, like the Consejo Consultivo of the IME, which is primarily led by migrantes living in the United States. There are, if on the one hand there are sort of Latino spaces like Hispanic Heritage Month, there are migrante spaces like the Fiestas Patrias, y la ETSA, etc. There is migrante media, where if on the one hand you have Hispanic magazine, on the other hand you have lots of Spanish language media, in fact not just primarily actually broadcast media, which has gotten very, very big, and you can consider it in a way as part of this larger network. Migrante-led institutions, very notably here in Chicago, the National Museum of Mexican Art, and there are associations of essentially of Mexican business leaders, cámaras de comercio and associations, business associations of various sorts of migrantes.
There is, I think, something that is in these two slides that can come and illustrate this very well. You know the difference between the embassy and a consulate, right? No? Okay, the embassy is where the ambassador reigns. Who is the ambassador is the supreme representative of a foreign government before the American government, right? There is only one embassy. The embassy is in the capital of the host country, right? The American embassy in Mexico is in Mexico City. The Mexican embassy in the United States is in Washington, D.C. What is a consulate? A consulate, excuse me, is a foreign representation of the next order, right? And what it does is it's dealt really to it's meant to deal with more day-to-day rather than state-to-state affairs. So consulates really deal with travel permits, visas. If you ever go to a visa, go get a visa. Even if you go to an embassy, you get sent to the consular section. Okay, so it's really more the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty of the relationship between two countries. So there's always going to be one embassy, but there can be many, many consulates. Mexico right now has 52 consulates in the United States, all across the nation. So I want to bring your attention to something, which is, let's look at the Latino network. And what do we see? We see the embassy. Out of the embassy, right, when the ambassador goes and talks to an organization, he doesn't go to the Casa de Migrantes. He goes to talk to MALDEF, he goes to talk to NCLR, he does the annual organization, LULA, right? But look at what happens in the binational, in the transnational network, right? This is an important part. So even the Mexican government has a very nuanced view of who they're dealing with, right, and how they're dealing. The Mexican embassy is really dealing with citizens of another country that, yes, we may be related and we may look alike. The consulate is dealing with paisanos.
Okay. Then, if we have two strategies and to a certain extent, to a significant extent, two different networks, how do they relate to each other? The first step that we take in trying to figure this out, very simple, very general, is noticing. Because at first we thought that these were just two worlds that lived independently of each other, parallel universes. But we were very bound at first by where we were first doing our research, which was in the Southwest. And as we did more work, and especially when we came to Chicago and did focus groups here and did more historical study, we really found that there's variation in different parts of the country between this idea of two distinct strategies and two distinct networks that are parallel to each other. And part of the reason is that you have very different compositions of population in different parts of the United States between US-born Mexican Americans and Mexican-born migrantes, right? This is an inadequate attempt to try to relate this graphically. The size of each of these globos corresponds to the number, the absolute number, the size of the adult population of Mexican origin in a county, right? By far the biggest county it has of people 18 or over who are of Mexican origin, either Mexican American or Mexican immigrant, is LA County. You may find this surprising, but it's much, much bigger. The next one in size is Harris County, where Houston is. The third one in size is Cook County with Chicago. This is 2006 data, so it has to be updated. But nevertheless, those are the differences in size. But where they are in the graph shows you the balance between the US-born Mexican American population and the Mexican migrante population, the Mexican-born population. On this side of the diagonal divide, the majority is US-born. On that side of the diagonal divide, the majority is migrante, Mexican-born. Just adult population. We're not talking about second generation or we're not talking about people under 18. Now, if we had a different graph, it would show more clearly that there's a whole array of variation that you can see between a place like Cook County here, Chicago, in which the clear majority of the adult population of Mexican origin was born in Mexico. Son migrantes. The great majority.